Hello there, IELTS 7 Plus students, and welcome back to another feedback lesson. So a lot of students asking for more of these lessons. As ever, do keep your feedback coming in. Let me know what sort of lessons and activities you'd like added to the IELTS 7 Plus course. I'm always trying to update and improve things for you. So another IELTS Task 1 feedback lesson where I'll read through the question and then in detail go through the student answer, give feedback, make edits, and of course assign the Task 1 report an accurate Bandscore. Again, this is really useful for you because you can see the kinds of mistakes that students make and that you need to avoid, but also it gives you a great insight into how the examiner thinks. So yeah, super useful lesson, and of course lots of people asking for more of these too. So without further ado, let's get moving. So the first thing to do is to just read through our question, as always. So writing task 1, you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. That's one thing that I'll just mention quickly that I can't tell from this assessment writing. Of course, you've got an hour for task 1 and task 2. It's recommended you spend 20 minutes on task 1. Now, a lot of students send me over writing for assessment. Of course, I don't offer assessment as part of the course, but I do sometimes try and give a quick bit of feedback if I can to students, IELTS 7 Plus students. But I can't see how long it's taken. So, if people are spending 40 minutes on a task 1 report and then spending an hour on a task 2 essay, that's obviously not going to work. So I can't take into account if this was written within 20 minutes. Just something to think about there. The charts below show the results of a survey of adult education. The first chart shows the reasons why adults decide to study. So we've got two charts here. We've got a bar chart and a pie chart. The pie chart shows how people think the costs of adult education should be shared. So the first one is reasons why adults study. Second one, the costs should be shared. Okay, interesting. And write a report for a university lecturer, describe the information below. Write at least 150 words. Okay, so looks pretty straightforward to me. We've got two different charts to go from. The first thing I always do is to check the word count. Now, I can see just by looking at this after looking at thousands of these things, that's probably way over. Yeah, 208 words. So, yeah, that's a good amount. Again, I do say to students, look, if you've written 250 words and it's taken you 25 minutes, it's probably too long. Ideally, these reports, I think, are great when they're around that 170, 180 word count, because that will probably give you sufficient depth. 200, of course, perfectly okay if you can write that within 20 minutes. But I just feel like when students start pushing into that 230, 250 word count, of course, I can't time them, but I think that often means it's probably a bit too long. You don't get extra marks for writing more. Detail, yes, you need to go in depth, but you can generally achieve that under a 200 word count. And then you can focus more, you can spend more time on quality and editing as you write. So just a recommendation from me, I'd probably be aiming for under 200 words, but this looks to be perfectly fine. Okay, so let's have a read through. I'll give my thoughts as I read through and generally make some small edits. I'm not going to change absolutely everything, but I will make some edits and then I'll give it a Bandscore at the end. Okay, so introduction. The given bar chart illustrates the rationales behind adults' decision to study. Okay, interesting. The given bar chart illustrates the rationales behind adults' decision to study. Yeah, that sounds perfect to me. A nice paraphrase. The pie chart, on the other hand, depicts people's views on how adults' educational expenses should be distributed. Okay, interesting. So I like the way that they've used two sentences to introduce this report. Generally, 98% of the time, it's just a one sentence paraphrase. what they could have done, the charts below show the results of a survey of adult education. They could have shortened this most likely. Again, it kind of saves time. They could have just said, the given charts show the results of a survey from adults about adult education. Something like that. So they could have mushed this probably into one sentence. However, grammatically, this is really good. The language is pretty great as well. And I quite like the way that they've used two sentences to introduce both graphs. But the only thing I would probably say is this kind of language, on the other hand, these sort of opinion openers and this linking language, it's not particularly what we're looking for in Task 1 reports. These Task 1 reports, it's just factual report language. It actually is a nice way to use commas to separate this phrase here, which is great grammatically. But to be honest, I would probably take that out. I don't think you really need this because on the other hand, yeah, okay, the pie chart is different. So we're using on the other hand to show a difference between pie chart and bar chart. But actually, there's no real need for it. So the pie chart depicts people's views. That's it. That's more Task 1. Less beautiful language, less opinion openers and linking language, more factual, done. That's exactly what we're sort of going for. One more time, let's read through. The given bar chart illustrates the rationales behind adults' decisions to study. Yeah, you see, I would probably also say make this plural. Adults' decisions to study. I think that because the subject-verb agreement there, I think we should really make that decisions. Adults' decision to study. Yeah, I think decisions is better. The pie chart depicts people's views on how adults' educational expenses should be distributed. I do like their use of possessive apostrophes. They've been quite accurate with that. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Overall, most grown-ups decide to pursue their education either due to a pure interest in the subject or to gain certain qualifications. Okay, so this overview, overall, most grown-ups decide to pursue education due to pure interest in the subject or to gain qualifications. Okay, so that overview, it looks like this is almost, I was wondering if this is more of an opinion the writer has. So I was a little bit worried there. But they're basically paraphrasing this here. So the overview, I always say big picture. What is the main message you get from the data? Don't go into specifics. The overview really can be a few different things. There's not one specific answer for a report generally, but the overview kind of just what's the one big takeaway. And here, what they've looked for is the extreme data. And by that, I mean the data that is most prominent, is most highest. Or you could also look at the data that is lowest and talk about that as an overview. So they basically said, I assume this first sentence will give an overview for this, and the second sentence will give an overview for this. Let's take a look. Overall, most grown-ups, and I like the way they've used a mix of language here, adults, grown-ups. Overall, most grown-ups decide to pursue their education either due to pure interest in the subject or to gain qualifications. And that's correct, yeah, 78%. So that's a big chunk. So I think that that's a nice overview just to say that without saying over 78% or at 78%. That's specific details that we leave for our detailed paragraphs. Okay, let's take a look at this overview sentence here. Furthermore, while people believe that the student should receive some financial assistance, they also believe that the individual student should bear most of their educational expenses. Okay, yeah, we're giving an overview for this here. It's a little bit tricky to give an overview for this because realistically, there's not a lot of data to expand on here. I think this is okay. Furthermore, again, I wouldn't really be using that kind of language. Just try and keep it really factual, really report, really academic based. While people believe that the student should receive some financial assistance, which is the taxpayer helping, the employer helping, They also believe that the student should bear most of their educational expenses. Yeah, I think so. How the costs of each course should be shared. Right, so this is basically saying that I suppose most people think the taxpayer or the employer should spend, or the individual should pay for it, or as it should be. Yeah, so I guess it's, how people think that it should be shared for a person to go on courses. This is fine. This is great. And a nice little overview in terms of this information. I would even possibly look to shorten this, to be honest. I think that you could write something along the lines of, there were a few different suggested means in order to financially support the cost of tuition. And this is even more general. It's even less specific. Because again, I'm just trying to, especially with this, because there's only really 3 things to report on. I think we really want to leave this as much as possible for the detailed paragraph. So I would probably say this is better, shorter, gives less information. Whereas here we're saying receive some financial assistance, the individuals should bear it. So we're going into that this is the individuals should bear most of the cost. This is probably better for the detailed paragraph, and to add the language in. It is good. Look, that I would still say this is a good Bandscore for an overview with few changes. However, could be probably better if we just do something more general. There were a few different suggested means in order to support the cost of tuition. There you go. So that's probably a better way of phrasing it. I'm actually just going to delete that though. You've seen what I would write there. Okay, so pretty good so far, I think. Few changes. Let's move into the detailed paragraph. Grown-ups, I probably wouldn't use that too much. Now, grown-ups, fine. It's a little bit unacademic. I would probably go with adults here. Many adults, or let's have a look. Adults, most adults. The most popular reasons, so this is where changes kind of need to be made. The most popular reasons for further studies. There we go. So a change in there. The most popular reasons for further studies were their interest in the subject and to gain qualifications, which stood at 40% and 38% respectively. So this is very much a key structure that I teach in the course and model a lot, and using this respectively. So that's great, and a great way to split up our clauses here with the comma, which stood at 40 and 38% respectively. No need for the comma there, so just a slight change there. And I'm going to underline this. Terrible English, sorry. Okay, the most popular reasons for further studies were their interest in the subject and to gain qualifications, which stood at 40% and 38% respectively. Perfect. Moreover, being helpful for the current job was the third choice at 22%, almost double that of being able to change jobs, which was 12%. So this is an interesting bit of detail here as well. Again, moreover, I'm not particularly keen on this in a Task 1 report. I think just keep it without those sort of linking languages and sentence starters. Being helpful for the current job. Being helpful for their current job was the third choice with 22%. At is probably more accurate. Almost double that. Being helpful in their current job. Let's have a look what's suggested here. Being helpful in their... Okay. Quite useful to have Google make the changes sometimes. Being helpful in their current job was the third choice, was the third most popular choice. Just to be more specific, at 22%. This is what I like. Comma, great use of comma to split up the clauses here. Almost double that of being able to change jobs, which was 12%. Let's have a look. So We said 22% here. Being helpful in their current job was third. And then they've made a bit of a jump and gone here to just make that comparison between halves, which is great to do. It is really good to sort of talk about doubles and halves and 5 times more than if you can in parts. This is always a good way to explain and report and compare. And the examiner will look at this favourably and say, okay, so they're making the link between doubling and halving as well as reporting the specific details. So this is really good. Almost double that of being able to change jobs, which was 12%. Now that's also accurate because it's almost double. 24% would be double. So almost double that of being able to change jobs, which was 12%, which stood at... I'm just going to make a slight change, not a big one, which stood at 12%. Which was 12% is fine. Which stood at 12% is slightly more academic. Okay, looking good. Improving prospects of promotion and enjoying learning both recorded a percentage of 20%. Fantastic. And they're sort of linking those two pieces of data together there and talking about they're the same. So again, another comparison. However, social reasons such as meeting people were the least preferred. Probably want to stick to singular here. Was the least preferred. Was the least preferred. Is it a preference, really? I suppose was the least recorded choice of taking on further studies. Again, it's probably a little bit too much detail, but it's just a bit more accurate. Was the least preferred or was the least recorded choice? I think that's a little bit more detail, a little bit more specific for the data that we're talking about. However, social reasons such as meeting people was the least recorded choice of taking on further studies. So we've got that phrasal verb there, taking on further studies, with a percentage of 9%. I don't think we need that comma there. Just a slight overuse. It happens quite a lot in student writing that there's an overuse sometimes of comma when it's not really needed. However, social reasons, such as meeting people, you see there we could probably add a comma to separate this. However, social reasons such as meeting people, was the least recorded choice of taking on further studies with a percentage of 9%. In fact, this is something that I often recommend to students. So commas here are probably okay. I don't think it's terrible to use a comma there. However, I do feel that it would be better with brackets. And I often say to students, wrong way around. I often say to students, where you can, don't use them inaccurately. Don't use them just for the sake of using them. But brackets are just like a good, it's like the sprinkling the icing on top of the cake. It doesn't really add too much in terms of overall taste. This is something of an analogy, but it does just give it that extra bit of quality. So if you can use brackets correctly, don't use them inaccurately or you'll lose marks. But if you find a spot where you can throw some brackets in and it really works, do it, because the examiner will look at that and go, good use of punctuation. It's not just commas, it's not just full stops, capital letters, a hyphen maybe, a bit more advanced. Brackets as well. If you can get them in, do it, because it really does show a level of fluency, and the IELTS examiner he's going to mark you higher probably. Just something like that could make the difference between a 7 and a 7.5. It sounds silly, but it adds overall class and quality to the writing. Okay, however, social reasons such as meeting people was the least recorded choice of taking on further studies with a percentage of 9. I'm just going to shorten this actually, at 9%. There we go. So a few changes there. It looks like I'm making big changes, but really I'm rewriting this to be a Bandscore 8.5 or 9. But the base writing here is pretty good. This is a solid report, to be honest. Okay, let's take a look at our second detailed paragraph here. Upon asking people about who they think should contribute to adults' study fees, okay, that's pretty good, I think. Most people felt that the individual student must pay the biggest portion, which is 40% of the expenses. Fine, that's great. Yeah, I'm not going to make any changes to that. It's almost a little bit too task 2 reporty, task 2 essay-like upon asking people. But I can see why the student chose to do this, because they wanted to. There just isn't much information here, so it looks like the students really tried to bulk out their writing to get the writing count, the word count. Wow, I lost my words. To get the word count up. So, you know what? I'm not going to change anything there. It is a little bit too task 2 essay-like, but, you know, I think it's fine. On the other hand, the pupil's employer should be responsible for 35% of the fees, while the taxpayer can be the least contributors with 25%. There's literally only really one change I'm going to make here. While taxpayers could be, let's use the hypothetical, could be the lowest contributors with 25%, I'm making a couple of changes, of total tuition fee. Let me just check. Is it tuition fee? Yeah, cost of course. So we will go with tuition fee. The reason I was just checking that, and of course accuracy is very important in the task 1 report. If you get your percentages wrong, if you sort of don't interpret the data correctly, you'll lose marks. Now, I was just double checking that this isn't the cost of course and student living, like whole university studies for adults or whatever the course may be. It doesn't particularly say university. If it was course and student loans and cost of expenses, I couldn't really just say tuition fee. However, cost of each course. So yeah, it is really tuition fee, course fee. Okay, let's just read this back. On the other hand, the pupil's employer should be responsible for 35% of the fees, while taxpayers could be the lowest contributors with 25% of total tuition. And I'm going to take out that fee because repetition, which is always something to try and avoid somewhat. And there's one more change. This is completely unfair on the student. I apologise to the student. This is just completely me being picky and pedantic and British. I prefer using whilst. And in all honesty, while is perfectly fine. It's good English. Whilst is more British. And I think it sounds more academic personally. However, I could also change this one here. While people believe. That probably is a bit more of a while. Anyway, there you go. So we've gone through this whole report and I've kind of rewritten this to be, your Bandscores, your top sort of 8.5, 9s. If I was really going to make sure it was a 9, I'd reread it and make sure everything was in place. And just make sure that, as you should at the end of your writing process, go through, have a quick read. Without a doubt, I could probably read this again and make a change to things just to make sure it was going to be that top piece of writing. However, I'm not going to do that. But what I will do is I'll probably add this after the lesson into a document so that you can just read it through. It's really good practice. This is kind of going away from the feedback here. It's really good practice to read through task 1 reports, task 2 essays multiple times. Of course, only the top Bandscore ones, my model answers. It's really, really good practice to read them through 4, 5, 6 times, to watch me write them, those live model answers, multiple times. I know it feels repetitive, but repetition is very much a part of language learning, which is why reading, especially in younger people, is a great way for them to improve their language. That repetition and exposure to vocabulary and grammar eventually makes their language skills much better. So I would highly recommend watching my IELTS live writing videos multiple times to improve your overall skills, and read the model answers multiple times. I will add this after the lesson. In terms of Bandscore for this student, it was a pretty strong report to begin with, to be honest. I think in terms of this video lesson, it's good just to see the changes I would make. However, I'm not going to as I said, I'm not going to give it like a crazy specific band score. It was probably around the 7. Yeah, I'd probably say it was a band score 7 in terms of accuracy, language used. The organization was fantastic. The way that they very simply made DP1 this, DP2 the pie chart, and it was just a really simple way, and simple is always good for organization. Keep things simple. I think that the way they structured this was great. So organization was very strong. Lots of good language, though there was some edits needed, and grammar is, of course, one of the key parts of our scoring. So I would probably say around the 7 mark, possibly even a 7.5, just with a couple of edits. But of course, we've made some bigger edits throughout, and it's up to that 8.59 now. Okay, so as I said, I'll add this in for you so you can read through it, have a go at that a few times, internalize the language, and yeah, that's it. Let me know which other videos you would like to see.